We're in the helping profession. We give a lot of ourselves to our family members, to our students, to other colleagues, that it's important to do some internal reflection as well.
I think I did everything correctly on the first try. Maggie, you should have seen me last week. I was on with Megan Deegan, who's also a member of the Teach Better team.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have her up in the stream. Like you're there next to me. It was just me. I didn't have the lovely backdrop that Marcus created. So
you got it down this time.
So now I consider myself a pro, hopefully. And hopefully somebody will pop in and tell us that we look good and we sound good and everybody can hear us. But I do want to take a minute to introduce the lovely Maggie Walsh. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning. I'm so excited.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it is you do? I know what you do, but can you tell everybody a little bit about what you do?
Of course. So I am a school counselor in the Hazlitt district with Becky, and we work with fifth and sixth grade students. I'm shared between two buildings actually in the district. So I'm half-time at Becky's school, half-time at another school. I've been in counseling for about 4 years. And I'm also a licensed associate counselor, so I do mental health services outside of school as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yes, I like to say that Maggie is my own personal counselor because not only does she counsel the kids, but I found myself in her office many days as well. Mm-hmm. So we work together now.
More staff than students.
We've worked together for a few years now. Mm-hmm. And I knew when we started having these daily drop-ins for the Teach Better team, I knew that you would be really a perfect person to bring on because you see it from all sides and you hear it from all sides. Mm-hmm. And now that we're several weeks into this remote learning, scenario, we've seen a lot. And we've seen a lot of things change and evolve almost on a daily, but definitely a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. So I know that you have, one of the things that resonated with me when we first started talking, and this was going back a few weeks, and you said, as this goes on, it's really going to take a toll on not only the students, but on the staff members too, their emotional well-being. And I thought to myself, and that's really stuck with me, because I was like, you're right. And I don't necessarily think it's something that we can prepare for. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think when it first all happened, especially, for students and staff, I know in our district, we had to adapt over a weekend. Yeah. Some other districts had, a week to prepare or, a month to prepare or whatever it was. But we left school on a Friday and we were remote learning on a Monday. Yeah. And I think for the kids and our students is that the first week, it's like, oh, cool. This is cool. I'm learning online. And now fast forward 5 weeks, it starts settling in okay, there's something going on in our world that I can't control. And that's a scary feeling. And I think for staff too, it's a lot of missing out on things and, craving that normalcy. And I know we talked about this. You almost have to create this new normal for yourself in order to kind of push through. And be able to adapt.
Yeah. You have this great Google form that you created that is a check-in for students that myself and a lot of the homeroom teachers put in their, announcements daily to check in with you. And I know that you've gotten a pretty great response to that, right? Can you talk a little bit about, what are students really reaching out to you more about?
A lot of it is actually the social emotional aspect of things, being able to cope with what's going on. A lot of our students, home is not always a stable place for them. For some of our students, school is the safe place. So it's been hard for a lot of our kids at home to get that privacy and to be able to really, really give me insight as to what's going on with them at home. They're struggling with routines, creating their own routine at home. That's been a really big one that we've talked about a lot. Providing coping skills has been a big piece too. Also, students that have other family members who have been impacted by the virus and what that looks like, or if parents are first responders. So there's been a lot of, I'm really grateful that they're reaching out to me because, and there's only so much connection I can do with them and only so much I can help. So it's been a really, really great thing just to be able to talk with them and to be able to ease their worries a little bit more. And I think, seeing us as staff members, as a counselor, that's a comfort for them.
Yes. So a familiar face.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just want to take a minute to say good morning to all the people that are watching and have tuned in this morning. So we have Brianne and Alex. Good morning. Jeff, aren't you proud? I got the backdrop up. We have Megan here, Joe, Mary. Good morning, everybody. And once again, if you're just tuning in, I have with me my own school counselor. I call her my own school counselor, but she really is my counselor. She should be charging me a fee. The lovely Maggie Walsh, who I quote a lot when I'm on Twitter chats. I'm like, well, Maggie Walsh said. But it is true because you have a lot of great insights and the kids love, whether it's in person or virtually now, they love to connect with you, and you really do, you've developed such a rapport with them. And I know you do a lot of great things when we are in school. And you hit an important, the thing to mention. So I remember reaching out to you right before spring break because I have a couple of students whose families are first responders. And we, normally they are very on top of things, kind of kids. And we kind of noticed a little bit of a fallback with that. And I remember thinking that, that's not like them. And knowing that what their parents do for a living, I reached out to the families, and the families did express that it wasn't necessarily, although I'm sure that factors into it, so much about the families being first responders. It was really that they're social kids by nature. They're really social kids by nature. And they're really struggling with, it would be one thing if we were out of school remote learning and they were able to get together with their friends and they were able to, but they're not even, or seeing them on the sports field, but they're not even able to do that. And that's really what is starting now that we're, this is our 5th week of remote learning, but really it's our 6th week if you include spring break in lockdown. And, I think that's where it's really, you're starting to see where even your students, like I said, who, normally are very responsive.
Yes.
When you're in school, are really starting to struggle.
Because as humans, we just crave that connection. And, it's amazing that we have all these platforms of Zoom and Google Meets and all these virtual platforms, but there's something about an in-person connection that you can't get from these platforms. And I think that, like we talked about, as time passes by and things start settling in, the kids are really, really craving that. I mean, I know for myself I am, so I can only imagine, our days are filled with, hundreds of people all the time and different communications and conversations to have. So when that, especially because it was a complete drop off, we just, we went from normal to completely the opposite of that. And, it's a very drastic change for, adults, staff and students.
Yes, 100%. We actually, Brianne just mentioned that Ohio just announced yesterday that they wouldn't be returning this school year. And I saw several of people that I know on Facebook posting about that. And she said, she knew it was coming, but it is still sad. Absolutely. And, she feels like there will be another wave of sadness and emotion. Yeah, absolutely. For a week. Now, we in New Jersey, we're out officially until May 15th. At this point, you and I were just having this discussion earlier before we logged on. There was an article that was in the paper yesterday, which alluded to the fact that if if we return, because in New Jersey, I think a lot of people don't understand, we start later than a lot of schools. So we start after Labor Day, but we don't get out until the end of June. And we're even later, our area is later for even districts in New Jersey. There are some districts that get out mid-June, but we get out of literally the last week of June. So there is.
It feels like July.
Really, it is. Well, the irony was we were like, oh, we had no snow days this year.
Yeah.
Get out early. So much for that plan. But we, so we're really unsure. I guess there is still a possibility that we could go back. But one of the things that was discussed was if we were to go back, there is the possibility that students and staff would have to wear masks and still try to practice some type of social distancing. And, that the thought of that is giving me anxiety. And
me too.
The woman who posted the article, a friend of mine on Facebook, and she said, the caption that she kind of put when she forwarded was, oh my goodness, like students who already have anxiety about school, what would this look like? And do you have any thoughts on that?
It's so interesting it's hard to fathom what that would even look like and feel like for the students and for ourselves as well. At first I think it would definitely feel uncomfortable. But just like this pandemic, you start creating new routines and new normalcy that with time, it would feel by the end of June, like, okay, this is what we do now. Yeah. So, it's being that being adaptable, I guess is really important.
Yeah. Although I'm still it's still strange to me going into, I'm trying to limit my grocery shopping to once a week. I was going once every 2 weeks, and I have to be honest with you, that was almost too much for me because it was too stressful for me to wait that long and then go into the store and try to, and I'm not a 2-cart kind of girl. So, so it's like I'm going to 1 cart. That's it. Whatever fits. And but to even just still be in the store with a mask on, and gloves is still surreal. So I can't really imagine that scenario either. But and it wasn't something. It was something that was floated out there in comments that were made. So we don't know what that'll look like. But I do think, as much as some of these, everybody's chiming in. Good morning, Dave. And people are chiming in saying, there's a lot of states that have already canceled school for the rest of the year. And for those of us that it has not been canceled, it's one of the, it's kind of like, it might be coming, but it still doesn't make it any less painful when it happens.
It creates, what I've been feeling is it creates a false hope. I see both sides. I see not saying we're going to cancel so that, to keep kids engaged and students engaged and things like that. But it also creates this false hope for a lot of people. And then, when your expectation is here and reality is here, in the middle leaves disappointment. So that's when those intense feelings arise. And I think something that's interesting is, because I know, some of the comments that have been talking about grieving, that in this pandemic, there's from a psychology background, perspective is, looking at it as a traumatic event, and also looking at it from a grieving process and the stages of grief. So it's an interesting dynamic at play. But I think the sense of sadness and loss and grief is normal right now.
Yeah. And Alex it made a good point. He said, it's one thing to cancel school for the end of the year. That is a big loss. But then to make the decision to close the building. So Alex, I'm not sure, is that like close the building like you can't get back in, or close the building like your building is like they're eliminating that building next year? Because that's actually happening in not the town that Maggie and I work in, but in the district I live in. They're closing one of the schools permanently. That decision had already been made. So there is that sense that people are not going to get that kind of closure, which is like a double whammy on top of what they're dealing with. I remember leaving our building on that Friday, and I just had this eerie feeling, and it was not anticipating we would possibly be out for the rest of the year. It was more like, I think that at the time, if you remember, because it seems like it was so long ago, it was like, well, we're out for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the back of our minds, we knew that there was a good possibility this was going to be longer than 2 weeks. And I remember right before I left, because we were all scrambling to grab as much as we thought we would need or that we could get. And I remember looking around my classroom before I left, and I still have shamrocks because we were going to be celebrating St. Patrick's Day the following week, and I still have shamrocks up on my windows. And thought to myself, like, I wonder when I'm going to get back in here. So Alex said, eliminating a building due to flooding. Yeah. So you're right. That's a whole separate element. You don't really have a chance to. It would normally be sad if you're closing a building, under normal circumstances, and giving kids the chance to say goodbye and faculty the chance to say goodbye. And now you've been robbed of that. So that is really hard. Amanda said,
yeah, I like what she said about having like a soft opening in the fall, being able to reconnect with your current students. I think that's a really, really amazing idea, because that sense of closure is so necessary in order to move forward, in order to grow. So that's impressive. I like that.
That's a really awesome idea. That's another thing, we'll have to take it, one day at a time and cross each bridge as we come to it. But that, of course, that's going to be an interesting topic of discussion for what is the fall going to look like. I mean, this has changed people in some way, and however big and however small, it's definitely changed people's experience. So, oh yeah, Amanda. Yes. Amanda said too, she was crying saying goodbye to her students because it's almost like she knew, and there, we're in a fortunate position too, Maggie, where we can connect with the students via video conferencing. But, I know that there are a lot of people in a lot of districts out there that cannot, for many different reasons. And that's hard too. I can't imagine not being able to connect with some of them the way I am. I mean, I've been changing things every week, as you know, because I have these discussions with you, and I'm trying different things to see, you almost have to do like a temperature check each week to see where kids are at emotionally, first and foremost. And yesterday I decided, since it was our first day back from spring break, to have a class meeting. And to do class meetings with my morning class and then with my afternoon class. And I have to say, it was great to see as many kids, because I thought this is first thing on Monday morning, and I'm not sure what kind of response I'm going to get. But they were very responsive to it. And I said, we're just catching up. I'm not going to try to, have you do any work or anything. I just want to see how you guys are doing. And it was nice because several kids that I had not been able to connect with prior to spring break, logged in to say hello. So it was good to see that.
Because I know before spring break, what we were nervous about, I know we talked, is the drop off in students. I almost wished that we didn't have spring break and we had like Friday and Monday off, like an extended weekend almost type of feel. So I'm really happy to hear that. And I think that temperature check is super, super important. I know that there is somebody in the other school, one of the teachers, and she does like an emotion check-in like every day. And, maybe some days 6 students show up, and then maybe some days 20 students show up, But as I think that connection and that awareness to get them to tune into those emotions and identify what's going on for them is really important right now.
And it definitely, we've talked about this. It changes on a daily basis. Sometimes it changes on an hourly basis, even for the staff. So what I find is hard for me sometimes, but I do it as a parent. I do it as a teacher. Is I have to put on my happy face. So even if I'm not having the best day, or I'm not emotionally feeling like I'm in a great place, I try my best not to let the students know that, or the kids. So I log on, and part of that I think has to do with, when I was teaching the Chinese students English for a long time, and you'd have to log into the class and you have to be really happy and energetic, and I kind of take that training almost and apply that here, because they like to see, and that's part of your role as an adult, is to be a role model.
And the kids feed off of your energy. So, and especially with anxiety is it's contagious. So when you're around it, you start internalizing it yourself. And, I think as adults, like you said, that being a role model is super important, because kids are looking at us of how we're coping with the situation.
Yeah.
On the flip side to that, I also think it's important for us to be able to cope with our emotions without them around, just so that we're processing it for ourselves too. So it feels
And
more authentic.
Yeah, I definitely think, and that's part of how I've kind of altered my plans as the weeks have gone on. And I just want to give a shout out hello to Ray and Randy. I know they do, Ray I know does a lot of check-ins with her students, and Randy as well. And Randy said they're still doing that. So what's nice about always having done check-ins like that is that is a sense of normalcy for the kids, right? So they were already used to that. So that's something that hasn't changed. So it's almost like you're not even making like a big deal over it. You're just like, hey, just seeing how things are. Like I've always been seeing how things are. In the beginning, I was doing a lot of, I was so excited because initially we were not going to be meeting with students. We were not, they did not have the capability. I think it was shut down initially, Google Meets and Zoom. So they couldn't log on. And then the district, within a couple days, really, changed that policy. And then I started going like meeting happy. I mean, I was like ready to log on with everybody and anybody. But I did realize that for me personally, that started to take a toll, on me emotionally. It was because I was, I was constantly worrying so much about them and reaching them, and a lot of students, I think, just needed that initial week or two to kind of settle into things and adapt. And then they, fortunately we're in a very good spot where our kids have access to technology. They particularly at our grade level, which is 5-6 building, and you're in 2 5-6 buildings, they have one-to-one Chromebooks. Internet access is not really an issue. So that we don't have those hurdles, which are hurdles that many people do have, and that's a whole other element of stress and anxiety for staff and for students.
100%. And I know there's something floating around on Facebook or Twitter, and it's, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. So, he talks about like food and safety as being like the foundation of your needs. And then it's interesting in this, it's like a pyramid, and you build up, and it's like love and belonging and connectedness. And on top, it's school, because right now, all of those things are taking precedent right now, because without those, we can't access them as learners.
Yeah. And I know you've been very good about just checking in, obviously with me personally, but also saying, how are my own kids doing with all this? And I do anticipate, I kind of take it week to week, and I am also trying to do, kind of check-ins with them and spend time with them one-on-one. Hard to do the one-on-one. We certainly have a lot of time to spend together. Hard to do one-on-one. We try to like go for walks or something with the dog together. But I do know, I can see it with them that they might have a meltdown over something which would be seemingly small. And whether it's my second grader who gets upset because she got a question wrong on an assignment that normally wouldn't bother her, that stuff wouldn't faze her. It's all of a sudden, it's the tears. And I know that it's really coming from a different place. It's really not about that one problem. And so just, having patience with yourself and with your family members is, you're like I said, you're trying to put on a happy face a lot of times for other people, but you're right, you do have to take care of yourself. So why don't you give us some ideas of tips that, let's start with the students. What are some of your favorite mindfulness? Because I know you work coming into our classrooms monthly and doing lessons with the kids, which I'll talk about one of yours in a minute. But why don't you give us some of your favorite activities or things that you would suggest to do with students?
Yeah, definitely. I think building coping skills is super important for them. It's almost like making, there's a bunch of different activities of making like a coping cupcake or a coping skills toolbox, so that they can start really learning what helps calm them and what ease their worries, and a lot of them like to identify, oh, I watch Netflix or I put on the TV. And those are great distractions. So it's teaching them that, yes, distractions are good too, but you also need coping skills that process the emotion, like, journaling or yoga or mindfulness and things like that. So it's a combination of both, especially, our students at our age, a lot of times like, oh, I just put TV on. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And what else are you doing to process that emotion? Because
that's interesting. I had not thought about that. You're right. It's which I guess, I think a lot of adults use too, a distraction versus a coping skill.
Yeah, to actually process it. And that's a challenge. It really is. You're talking a lot about mindfulness. The great thing about remote learning and mindfulness is that there are a ton of free apps out there. And I encourage students to go on them. And also I go on them myself, Calm, Smiling Mind, Stop, Breathe and Think is a really great one. And a lot of them are, like I said, are free. And they can bring you through mindfulness, meditations, yoga. There's a bunch of different things. I know Go Noodle now has a lot of mindfulness and yoga, which is great. Because it's not just dancing and those types of videos. There's a great one on there, and it's called Release Your Inner Warrior, and they have to talk about how strong they are and say these mantras to themselves to make themselves feel better while they're in the warrior yoga pose. And I know a lot of our kids like that. So there are a ton of mindfulness resources online, which they're really easy to access.
Yeah. That's, we used to, again, when we were in school, one of the ways we would start our days was during the morning announcements, we would have a mindfulness activity that the students did. And I have to say the vast majority of mine participated, and enjoyed it. So maybe, that's an idea for me is during our weekly class meetings, because you can share your screen now with a lot of these online platforms with Zoom and with Google Meets, and I can always share a screen and we can either do a Go Noodle together, or I'll use one of the other ones. So good morning to Andrea. Yes, Maslow before Bloom, we were talking about that. Yes. And Bree says she is a big fan of Go Noodle. I like Go Noodle myself. I mean, even the dances and stuff like that are pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
So one of the activities that we did, and I literally think that you came into my class, it's all a blur at this point, but I really think it was the week.
It was
that last week that we were together. And Maggie does this great exercise on perseverance. And do you want to just explain a little bit about what the activity is?
Yeah. So, and I've done it every year because it's such a hit. So, and it's whenever in September I reflect with my sixth graders, I'm like, well, what was your favorite lesson last year? 100%. Are you going to bring the cups again? Are you going to bring the cups again?
I was just going to say, they might not remember the word, but they'll remember the cups.
So I say, okay, what was the lesson about? And then we backtrack and, perseverance. Okay. Yeah. So, it's a lesson on perseverance. And so, we talk about what it means to them, what it looks like when there's been scenarios that they have gone through that require perseverance. And then I give them a challenge. And what the challenge is that you give them 6 solo cups. And their challenge is they have to pick up all 6 cups using just one hand, and they cannot stack them inside of each other. They also they can't, the only body part that they can use is their hands. So they can't balance them on their forearm or, anything else, use their leg. Some of them are like, can I use my foot or my leg? Asking crazy things. And so, the goal is for them to pick up the cup. So I say, okay, they're like, oh, that's so easy, Ms. Walsh. And I'm like,
they do. Okay, and I sit there and chuckle every time I hear this.
Right. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the challenge here? They're like, I'm like, how many fingers do you have? They're like 5. And I'm like, oh, okay. We have 5 fingers, 6 cups. What can we do? And it's really, really interesting to watch it. Usually I tie that lesson then into a growth mindset lesson because it's, but then we're in remote learning, just because of the things that they say, like, oh my God, this is so hard. I can't do this. All that negative self-talk kind of comes into play. And it's so interesting. Once they get it, they feel this sense of accomplishment that it's just exudes, and the whole class is cheering for them because it is a hard challenge. In your class, the one class, it took a while, and then we finally got somebody that was successful.
Yes.
So they're like, this isn't even possible. I'm like, it's possible. possible. We just have to have what? And they're like, perseverance. So, it's a fun activity for them to do.
It is. And who would have thought then that lesson and that topic would have been so timely in that, through this whole scenario, everybody needs to, practice persevering. And that is probably one of the, we talk about, most fifth and sixth graders can barely say the word, let alone understand what it means and what it means to practice perseverance. But it is a good lesson. The other thing that I like about that lesson is that once one student gets the cups, one arrangement, you tell them, okay, well, now you can't use that the next person that comes up, you can't use that arrangement again.
Yes.
And then
yeah, then they have to think outside the box. So there's a lot of factors at play. Like, it sounds so simple, but there's so much learning going on, which I absolutely love. And a lot of times the kids will be like, oh, I'm going to go home and do this with my family. So it's just so interesting. You're right. How timely that was, because, especially in the midst of this pandemic, that's an important characteristic, to have and to practice.
Well, and the other activity that I did, which tied into what we were talking about we have our SEL committee at school, and we were trying to tie in different themes with different months. And in February, we were creating vision boards, and we had started the process in February, but by the time we got done with them and, kids, I had the students bring in old-fashioned magazines and actually cut out pictures from magazines representing different things that they wanted in their lives in the future. And it could be 2 years down the road. It could be, in high school, college, and then as adults. And they could also draw things in. So that was one of the I literally brought all of those vision boards home with me because I wanted to look at them, and I'm glad I did, because it's a nice reminder of the students. But, I just posted about them yesterday. I'm like, as we're, we need to keep this. It's actually good to have. Now, of course, I have them all. The students don't have them, but it's good to just kind of keep those vision boards, in your mind, to keep you focused on really what our end goal is. Right now it feels like we're doing this forever. We've been in it forever. But at some point in time, we will look back on this and, realize how much we all have grown from it, both, us and as educators, but also as just human beings, and in all of our, relationships. Andrea said she has a similar, I guess, activity with solo cups called Finding Sam.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I know you're going to Google that, Maggie. After we get off. Hey, Adam. Adam, day of office hours. I know. I have so like I said, I'm trying to mix it up in how I do things, but I have math meetings with my students on Tuesdays and Thursdays where they can check in with me for a live math lesson. So speaking of these daily drop-ins, we do them on the Teach Better Team private Facebook group on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 7 Central, 8 Eastern. If you are listening to this via podcast or catching us on YouTube, be sure to join the Teach Better Team private Facebook group so you can join in the discussion and the comments. And we love to hear from you and start off our morning with a good cup of coffee and some daily drop-in discussion. So what about for faculty, adults in these scenarios, Maggie, what would be your suggestions? We talked, some of them overlap, right? So some of these apps and everything we talked about, obviously adults can use too. What are your suggestions just in general for teachers?
I think one thing, I was listening to a podcast the other day and I found this really interesting, is creating a sense of normalcy with patterns and predictability. Because for our students, they come to school and everything is predictable. Like, okay, I wake up, I get the bus, I do this, right? So everything has like a schedule. And what I found interesting was the podcast was talking about how that impacts our brain, and how when we aren't using a routine or we're not following patterns, we're using our fight or flight response. We're acting from our fight or flight response in our brains. And then when we move towards this aspect of predictability, we start pushing our brains towards using more of the frontal lobe, and we're cooperation and creativity come into play. So I think it's interesting to look at it. I'm not a big, no offense, Ms. Becky, I'm not a big science person. However, I think learning about the brain and how it impacts our body is like fascinating to me. So, I think that sense of routine is important. And I know, at first, like, you try to create a routine that mimics what your old routine was like, and you're like, this doesn't feel right. So I think it's important not to try to recreate a routine, but create a new routine. So, if school doesn't start until 9, like as a family, are you all making breakfast together at 8 a.m. or whatever it may be, right? And then at 12 o'clock, you all go on a walk together, or, scheduling things throughout the day that provides that predictability and that consistency. And I found that really just interesting, how it actually impacts our brain and where we're functioning from.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually just wrote a blog post, and it's about the difference, and this is really more of a personal issue for me, between a schedule and routine. I've never been a huge schedule person, and that's a personal preference, honestly. And it's really because I feel very trapped when I say the word schedule. And I think just by notion of being a teacher, I don't have a choice, right? I'm in a schedule. I'm accountable. I like routines, though. I do like routines because I feel like it gives you a framework, but it offers some flexibility in terms of how you arrange your time. And when I'm in a household with there's 5 of us and the dog here, and some of my own children have different. We were just talking about this too. Have different Zoom meetings at different times of the day. And so we're very fortunate. We have several devices, but not all of them have great working cameras. So then you've got to take that into consideration, shared space and things like that. And,
I also think that finding new, I know for myself, so like my routine is so shaken up, and I'm opposite of you. Like, I like a schedule, I like routine because it gives me that sense of control. And when there's a pandemic that I have absolutely no control over, what am I going to do? Okay, control what I can, and that has been, different because I live far away from work, so I commute every day. So like being in just something so simple, I realize how long I spend in the car and how much that's impact, that I have so much time now, and I'm like twiddling my thumbs, like, what do I do? So I'm trying to discover like new hobbies and things that bring me joy, outside of, I love to bake and I love to cook and I also love to exercise. I'm like, I have to find other things that bring me joy outside of that. And it's been a challenge, but I think that's you were talking about earlier, of taking something away from this and growing from this. And for me personally, it's being okay with some downtime and some quiet time and not always going.
Yeah, for me, for sure, as well. And I know several educators had posted that they too had long commutes. And now that that's been taken away, they're like, I don't know, when am I going to listen to my podcast? I listen to all my podcasts on the car ride. And it is true. So kind of trying to find a spot to fit those in. We have Cheryl, who said, speaking of math, has anyone else used Jamboard? No, I have not, especially for math. Oh, well, I'm a math teacher. There you go. I'll be teaching that later. I have not heard of that. And that's another reason I like coming on here, Maggie, is because I always learn new things as I go.
I love it.
And routines are great for students with disabilities. 100%. I think that that's the population that is a population that's struggling and trying to find ways to meet their needs is top of everybody's list.
Yeah,
posting an agenda through Classroom or Google Calendar is helpful. I use Loom to make weekly videos. I've not heard of Loom either. Well, look at that. Cheryl, thank you for sharing all of these great resources. I'll have to look into these because we did talk about the Calm app. To practice mindfulness. Yes, thank you. But I did not hear of those other ones. So we're always happy for people that are popping in and sharing new resources.
And somebody commented that we need to make time in our schedules for self-care, and that's important. Because before this, it's like, well, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. Well, now we do. So it's like, okay.
Well, that's what I have even joked with my own husband, because we're doing a lot of purging and things, like that. Kind of my joke was over spring break, which, I agree with you. I had mixed feelings initially. Should we just keep going? or, but I have to say, I think I myself, I didn't even realize until right before how much I needed kind of that break to kind of rejuvenate. But my rejuvenation was that we got a dumpster and started cleaning out our garage. It's stuff that for me, that was actually very therapeutic because it's stuff that's been bothering me for years. I haven't had time to do. And to your point, I said to my husband, if we don't do this, we're never going to have this time. So let's do it now. And it did help my mood. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it did.
It doesn't sound ridiculous. Decluttering. And I think, it's interesting if you're decluttering like all around your house right now, it gives you this sense that everything is okay. Like my life is okay when I can make sure that if the book is in the place that it should be or whatever. So when the pandemic's going around, which is something that's not okay and it feels super scary, like it sounds so simple, but having that ability to organize at home gives you that sense of, oh, okay, I'm okay. My world's okay right now.
That's interesting. Yeah. I like I said, I guess I didn't realize how much anxiety it was really causing me until I was able to get rid of it. And now, I'm skipping into my garage, which sounds ridiculous, but it's like normally, I wasn't able to skip. There was so much stuff that I was tripping over things, bringing groceries in. So it is very helpful. Alex mentioned actually, if anybody's looking for a new hobby, tabletop gaming. Interesting. Give you tips on how to get started. That would be, I might even try that for my kids because, there's only so many video games, I think, and TV, to your point, that they can watch. So, spring cleaning. I have a ton of teaching stuff I don't use. I'm cleaning it out slowly. Yes. So I found in my basement these boxes. And Maggie, you didn't know me when I first started in the district and was at a completely different school. But I found all of this old test prep because when we were transitioning schools, I didn't want to lose it. So I brought it home. I mean, literally, these boxes are like 10 years old. And I was I finally got rid of them. I said, well, when it's not even called this test anymore, our test used to be called the New Jersey Ask. I said, when it's not even called this test anymore, I think it's safe to say I can get rid of it.
Yeah, that's a sign.
Cleared up a lot of room. But well, once again, thank you for being with us. The Daily Drop-In happens on the Teach Better Team Facebook group, private group, on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern. If you are listening on YouTube or via podcast, please make sure you join our private Facebook group so that you can participate in these daily. We would love to have you. And of course, Maggie, I really do appreciate you being with us today. Do you have any final thoughts or?
Well, thank you so much. This was an awesome, very, very fun experience. And just, and for all of us, just to remember to take a moment for ourselves, and I think that that's important as we're, in our profession, we're in the helping profession. We give a lot of ourselves to our family members, to our students, to other colleagues, that it's important to do some internal reflection as well.
And show yourself some grace in all that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you guys for tuning in. Bye-bye.